This video is sponsored by PAPERLIKE. What's up guys, Lucas here. Today you're going to learn how to make the best inking brushes. I have been a digital artist for over 10 years now, and I work as an illustrator in Photoshop or Procreate every single day of my life. Brushes, of course, are one of the most important tools for any artist, and in order for you to feel comfortable painting in digital mediums, you gotta have good brushes. Today I'm gonna show you how I go about creating a brand new set of inking brushes for my personal use and also for my pack, the LP brushes. Let's get to it. If you want your brushes to feel traditional, start traditional. When I started making brushes, I thought that just by making some shapes and recycling textures that I grabbed online, it would be enough. But after making hundreds and hundreds of brushes, I learned that to have good quality brushes, you need good quality textures. So I started by grabbing some of my favorite traditional inking tools, my 1-inch brush, my jar of Winsor & Newton black ink, my dip pen, and some of my favorite brush pens. The texture of the paper is also very important. I want it to be slightly textury, not to be completely solid and digital, because the texture of that paper will eventually translate to the brushes. I start by having some fun trying every kind of stroke that comes to mind, using a wet brush for bold marks, splattering with a toothbrush, scratching with my dip pen, and even tapping with my finger to get some smudges in the page. I am looking for two things when I'm doing this, the two ingredients for making a digital brush: the brush tips and the textures. Brush tips are going to be the shape of the brush itself, but maybe even more important are the textures. Those we need to make seamless, and I will teach you the best way to do that later in the video. In order to preserve the quality of the brushes, I light them as neutrally as possible, with the window on one side and the softbox on the other. With the textures ready, I bring them into Photoshop. Here is where we are going to be making our brushes, but don't worry, I make my brushes for Photoshop, for Procreate, Artstudio and Clip Studio Paint, and the method for making them is very similar in every app. The two reasons why I start with Photoshop are: first, because it is the software that I use the most for painting professionally and personally, and second, because brushes from Photoshop can be exported in a format called .abr, and several apps, including Procreate and Artstudio and many others, can read that file. That way I can work with my favorite brushes in all my favorite apps. But of course, natural feeling brushes don't mean a thing if you don't have a natural feeling surface to draw on. That is why I use PAPERLIKE on my iPad. PAPERLIKE is a screen protector that turns the glassy, squeaky mess of a screen that comes with your iPad into a matte beauty. Reflections are less noticeable, I have better control for my lines, and it even sounds like real paper. If you haven't tried PAPERLIKE and like me love drawing on the iPad, you gotta give it a try. The link is down there in the description. Thank you very much PAPERLIKE for sponsoring this video. The brushes that I want to create are an expansion to the inking pack that I sell on my website, so I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted them to be. I needed a stippling brush, a scribbling one, maybe one or two for cross-hatching, and a buttery, smooth brush pen for line art. In Photoshop, I grabbed each of the textures and color corrected them so that they would have the perfect contrast. Once that is done, I grabbed the stains I made for the brush tips and I cleaned them on their own square canvas. For each one brush tip you want to create, it is super easy. You just go up there to edit and then define brush preset, and you're done. You have a new brush. Though make sure that the background for the brush is completely white so it is clean and sharp and it doesn't leave any stains when you're using it. Now, the secret ingredient for several of my brushes I create is the scatter effect. For example, for the stippling brush, I set a small scatter to around 30%. That will make the brush act like a spray of dots instead of making lines like a regular brush. Then I turn on the size jitter. That will change the size of the brush randomly so that it looks more natural or less digital. Then, and very important for a stippling brush, is to turn the angle jitter all the way up. This will rotate the brush tip also randomly, and it is the final touch for the perfect stippling brush. We are missing one very important ingredient, and that is the texture for the brushes. I prepared two textures for this pack. One is a wash of ink and water, and the other one is a mass of brush strokes. This watery one ended up being the most useful and the one that I used in most of the brushes. To make a texture, I create a new canvas. It doesn't need to be a square, I just copy the part of the texture that looks the most uniform and paste it on a new canvas. Now, it is very important that your texture is seamless. That means that you can paste the texture again and again and not notice the division between each of the parts. There is a filter that helps to do this in Photoshop, so let's check it out. In filters, go to other and then offset. This filter slides the image on the horizontal and vertical axis. Start by putting one of them in 0 and the other one wherever you want until you see the seam in the texture. Then select the area of the seam with the patch tool. This tool in Photoshop does magic to repair things exactly like seams. And voila, just like that, you have the seamless perfect texture that you were needing. Then you just go to edit, define pattern, and you have a new texture for your brushes. I do this for every brush. Even if most of them have different brush tips, they can reuse the texture and some of the settings. For every brush I create several variations and choose the one that feels more comfortable to me. I really don't like having hundreds and hundreds of brushes that just waste time for me to go through them. I prefer to have just a few very versatile ones. That's why I'm very selective of the ones that will go eventually in my pack. But before they are officially approved, this is my favorite part. We gotta test them. So of course, we're gonna make a painting. Since these brushes are meant to complement the other inking brushes in my pack, then I use some of those also. Oh, and I almost forget, in the background you can see that I have been using a paper texture. This is one of the watercolor papers that I give for free in my LP Essentials pack. You can find the link for those in the description, and as I said, it's free, you can just go there and download it. I try each one of them, just having fun with the splatters and the hatching and just going crazy with them, trying to see all the things that I can do with each brush that I created. I really like how the ink stains came out, and I had lots of fun with the splatters and the hatching and everything. It just feels very natural the way that these brushes came out. They really feel like natural ink on the paper. But of course, none of my brushes is ready without making sure that it works properly in Procreate and the other apps. So I import them in the app and I tweak the settings on each one of them until they feel as perfect as they did in Photoshop. Once that is done, my brushes are finished and they are ready to be used for paintings. I decided to make this expansion of brushes because I thought it would be a really cool idea to make Inktober digitally and maybe even not tell people that these paintings are digital and see how many people can spot the difference. So please tell me in the comments, what do you think? You can find the link for my brushes, these brushes, in the description. The pack, the LP brushes, comes not only with all the inking brushes that you saw in this video and the previous ones, but also with my painting brushes, sketching, textures, portraits, and a bunch of other things. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.